The crisp November air carried the scent of pine trees and distant wood smoke as Savannah adjusted her coat. The Thanksgiving invitation from her parents had been unexpected, almost suspicious. It wasn't that she didn't want to see her family, but years of subtle snubs and unspoken grievances had taught her to keep her distance. Still, this year felt different. Her mother had called her directly, her tone unusually warm. "Savannah, darling, you must come this year. Everyone will be here. It'll be a chance to reconnect," her mother had said, emphasizing the word reconnect, as though they'd ever been a close-knit family. Savannah hesitated then, but agreed. Maybe her success had finally earned her some respect. She wasn't just the middle child anymore. She was Savannah Richards, a marketing director at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. She'd worked her way up with sheer determination, surviving endless sleepless nights and office politics. Her car crunched up the long gravel driveway to the family estate. The house stood tall and proud, illuminated by warm golden lights. It was the kind of home that screamed tradition. Columns at the front porch, a perfectly trimmed lawn, and seasonal wreaths hung meticulously on the doors. But to Savannah, it was just a shell of memories, many of which she'd rather forget. As she entered, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses greeted her. The dining room overflowed with relatives she hadn't seen in years. Her mother, Patricia, rushed over with an overly rehearsed smile. "Savannah, look at you!" Patricia exclaimed, arms outstretched. Her eyes, however, darted briefly over Savannah's modest, yet elegant dress, betraying the judgment behind her smile. "You've done well for yourself." "Thanks, Mom. It's good to see everyone," Savannah replied, her voice steady but cautious. Her father, Gerald, approached next. Unlike Patricia, he seemed genuinely pleased. "Savannah, it's been too long. Come, let me introduce you to some of the guests." As Gerald led her through the room, Savannah's eyes caught glimpses of her siblings. Ethan, the eldest, looked as polished as ever in his tailored suit. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their parents' eyes. Olivia, the youngest, was perched by the fireplace, scrolling on her phone. She barely glanced up. "Savannah, it's so wonderful to see you," Ethan said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Still doing marketing, was it?" "Yes, still doing marketing," Savannah replied curtly. Ethan always had a way of making her achievements feel small, as though her career was just a hobby compared to his high-powered legal job. Dinner was announced shortly after. The dining table was a vision of Thanksgiving grandeur: silver candlesticks, embroidered napkins, and a spread that could feed an army. But as Savannah approached the table, her heart sank. There, at the far end, was a smaller, mismatched table with plastic chairs and paper plates. "The kids' table," Savannah muttered, her stomach nodding. Her mother's voice cut through the chatter. "Oh, Savannah, I forgot to mention, we're a bit tight on space this year. Would you mind sitting there?" Patricia gestured towards the kids' table, where a group of pre-teens giggled over spilled cranberry sauce. Savannah blinked, stunned. "Mom, there's plenty of room at the main table." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Well, you know how it is. Ethan brought his fiancée, and Olivia's new boyfriend is here. We had to make adjustments." Adjustments? Savannah thought. She wasn't a child. She wasn't some distant cousin who barely knew the family. She was their daughter, yet they'd relegated her to a corner like an afterthought. Ethan smirked from his seat. Come on, Savannah. It's just a seat. No need to make a scene. No need to make a scene, Olivia parroted, not even bothering to look up from her phone. Savannah's chest tightened, but she swallowed her pride and walked to the kids' table. She wasn't going to let them see her falter. As she sat down, a boy no older than 10 looked at her curiously. "You're old. Why are you sitting here?" Savannah managed a tight smile. "Because sometimes even grown-ups have to sit at the kids' table." The boy shrugged and went back to his mashed potatoes, but Savannah felt the sting of humiliation. She glanced at the main table, where her family laughed and toasted to what they likely considered another perfect Thanksgiving. Perfect, Savannah thought bitterly, except for the daughter they'd conveniently shoved aside. But this wasn't the final blow. That would come later in the evening, a moment so cutting that it would leave Savannah questioning everything. Savannah sat at the kids' table, her hands gripping the edges of the cheap plastic chair as though it was the only thing keeping her upright. Around her, the kids chattered and laughed, oblivious to her inner turmoil. Every so often, she caught snippets of conversation from the main table, the one where she should have been sitting. "Ethan's firm is considering him for partner next year," her mother said proudly, her voice carrying across the room. "That's wonderful news," one of the relatives gushed. "And Olivia, what about your art classes? Still painting?" "Of course," Olivia replied, flicking her hair dramatically. "I'm actually thinking of hosting a gallery event soon. You know, something exclusive." Savannah rolled her eyes. Olivia had been thinking about hosting a gallery for years, but nothing ever materialized. Still, their parents ate it up, showering her with praise for ideas that never left her Pinterest boards. As for Savannah, not a single question about her work, not a single mention of the promotions she'd fought for, the campaign she'd spearheaded. It was as if her accomplishments were invisible to them. "Do you want my cranberry sauce?" a little girl next to her asked, holding out a sticky spoon. Savannah forced a smile. "No, thank you. You can have it." The girl shrugged and went back to her plate, but Savannah couldn't bring herself to touch her own food. Her appetite was gone, replaced by a growing ache in her chest. She had hoped this Thanksgiving would be different, that her family would finally see her for who she was, a successful, independent woman who had carved out her place in the world without anyone's help. Instead, she was here, seated at a table meant for children, listening to her family gush over Ethan's latest achievement and Olivia's grandiose plans. "Savannah!" Her mother's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see her mother standing at the head of the main table, a glass of wine in hand. "We were just talking about how busy you must be with work. You're still doing, what was it again? Advertising?" "Marketing," Savannah corrected, her voice tight-sighing. "I'm a marketing director." Her mother waved dismissively. "Right, marketing. Well, we're just so proud of all our children. Everyone's doing so well in their own way." Savannah's jaw tightened. In their own way. It was a phrase her mother often used to gloss over things she didn't care about. "That's nice of you to say," Savannah replied, her tone sharp enough to draw a few glances. Her mother raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. Instead, turning to toast Ethan's fiancé for bringing her delightful pumpkin pie. The evening dragged on, each passing moment chipping away at Savannah's composure. She endured the subtle digs, the dismissive comments, the way her family barely acknowledged her presence. But the final straw came during dessert. As the plates of pie and cake were passed around, her father stood to make a toast. To family, he began, raising his glass, and to the people who make this family truly special. Ethan, for his incredible achievements and the bright future ahead of him. Olivia, for her creativity and the beauty she brings to everything she does. Savannah felt her stomach knot. And to my darling Patricia, her father continued, looking at her mother with affection, for keeping us all together and making this home a place we're proud of. Savannah's glass remained untouched. Her name hadn't even been mentioned, not once. As the room erupted in cheers and laughter, Savannah's head spun. How could they be so blind? How could they pretend she didn't matter? When the toast ended, Patricia approached her, smiling as though nothing was wrong. "Savannah, dear, could you help clear the kids' table? The children made quite a mess." Savannah stared at her mother, disbelief washing over her. "You want me to clean up?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Well, yes," Patricia replied, lightly. "You're already sitting there, and it's not like you're doing anything else." The words struck like a slap. Patricia didn't even notice the hurt in Savannah's eyes. Savannah stood slowly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The laughter and conversation at the main table paused as heads turned her way. She wasn't about to make a scene, not yet. But as she carried the plates to the kitchen, one thought burned in her mind. This is the last time they'll treat me like this. What Savannah didn't know was that the storm brewing inside her would soon spill over, and when it did, her family would never see her the same way again. Savannah stood in the kitchen, her hands gripping the edges of the sink as she stared out the window into the cold, dark night. The sound of her family's laughter echoed from the dining room, each burst of joy feeling like a dagger in her chest. She had always known she was the forgotten child, the one who never quite fit into their carefully curated image of a perfect family. But tonight, they had made it painfully clear. She didn't belong. The plates from the kids' table sat in the sink, a pile of smeared cranberry sauce and leftover pie crusts. Savannah took a deep breath and began rinsing them, her movements mechanical. She wasn't going to let her anger get the better of her. Not yet. As she worked, her thoughts spiraled. Was this how they saw her? As someone who didn't deserve a place at their table? Someone who could be dismissed and ignored without a second thought? "Savannah?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Ethan leaning against the doorway, a smug smile playing on his lips. He held a glass of wine, the liquid swirling lazily as he took a sip. "Still playing the martyr, I see," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Savannah straightened, her hands gripping the counter behind her. "What do you want, Ethan?" "Nothing, really," he said with a shrug. "Just thought I'd check on you. You seemed tense out there." "Tense?" Savannah repeated, her voice low. "I'm sitting at the kids' table while you're being toasted like some kind of hero. Forgive me if I'm not thrilled." Ethan chuckled, the sound grating on her nerves. "Oh, come on. It's just a seat. You always make things bigger than they are. That's why you're still, well, you." Her jaw tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know what I mean," Ethan said, taking another sip of wine. "You've done okay for yourself. Sure, but you'll never be on my level. And Mom and Dad know it. That's why they don't take you seriously." Savannah's chest burned with anger, but she forced herself to stay calm. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Is there a point to this conversation, or are you just here to gloat?" she asked. Ethan smirked. "No point. Just wanted to remind you where you stand. You're good at taking orders, Savannah. Maybe that's where you belong." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, his laughter trailing behind him. Savannah stood there, her hands trembling. Her entire life she had worked to prove herself, to show that she was more than just the overlooked middle child. And yet, here she was, being belittled and dismissed once again. The evening dragged on as Savannah forced herself to stay composed. She returned to the dining room, blending into the background as her family continued their celebrations. She laughed at their jokes, nodded politely during their conversations, and pretended not to notice when they ignored her. But inside, a storm was brewing. The breaking point came when the family gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert. Savannah had just sat down when Olivia plopped onto the couch next to her, her phone still glued to her hand. "Hey," Olivia said, barely looking up. "Do you think you could help me with something?" Savannah raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "Well, I need a website for my gallery," Olivia said casually. "You're good with, computers and stuff, right? Could you whip something up for me? For free, of course. Your family, after all." Savannah stared at her, incredulous. "You want me to design a website for you? Just like that?" "Yeah," Olivia said, finally looking up. "It's not like you're doing anything else, and it'll be good practice for you." Savannah laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Practice?" "Olivia, I run multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns. I don't need practice." Olivia rolled her eyes. "Okay, geez, no need to get defensive. I was just asking." Savannah stood abruptly, her patience finally snapping. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done being your doormat, Olivia. And I'm done being this family's afterthought." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Her parents, her siblings, even the cousins who had been arguing over the last slice of pie. Everyone stared, shocked by her outburst. "Savannah," her mother began, her tone warning. "No," Savannah said firmly. "Don't try to calm me down, Mom. I've had enough. You all treat me like I don't matter, like I'm not good enough to sit at your table or be a part of your conversations. But I'm done letting you make me feel small." Her father stood, his expression stern. "Savannah, this is not the time or place." "No," she interrupted. "This is exactly the time and place. You've ignored me my entire life. Well, not anymore. I've worked too hard and accomplished too much to let you belittle me." Her heart pounded as she looked around the room, taking in their stunned faces. She had finally said the words she had kept bottled up for years. But this wasn't the end. Savannah wasn't just going to walk away. She had a plan. A plan that would make her family finally understand the pain they had caused her, and when she was done, they would never treat her the same way again. Savannah left the room, her hands shaking from the intensity of her outburst. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she leaned against the wall in the hallway, closing her eyes. It wasn't just about the kids' table anymore. This was about years of being overlooked, ignored, and dismissed as if she didn't exist. Taking a deep breath, she straightened herself and walked into the guest room where she had left her coat and bag. She needed a moment alone, but as soon as she sat on the edge of the bed, the door opened and her mother stepped inside. "Savannah," Patricia said sharply, closing the door behind her. "What was that out there?" Savannah looked up, her face calm but her eyes burning with suppressed anger. "That was me finally saying what I should have said a long time ago." "You embarrassed us," Patricia continued, her voice low but filled with anger. "This is Thanksgiving, a family gathering. We don't air our grievances like this." Oh, I'm sorry, Savannah said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Should I have waited until Christmas? Or maybe New Year's? When exactly would it be convenient for you to hear the truth? Patricia folded her arms, her expression hard. You're being dramatic. You've always been so sensitive. We treat all of our children equally. Savannah laughed bitterly. Equally? Mom, you made me sit at the kids' table while Ethan and Olivia get treated like royalty. You couldn't even remember my job title, and you let Olivia talk down to me like I'm her personal assistant. Does that sound equal to you? Patricia sighed, shaking her head. You're twisting everything. We love you, Savannah. But you've always been difficult. You don't make things easy for us. Difficult? Savannah repeated, her voice rising. Presar. 'Cause I didn't follow your script? Because I didn't stay home like Olivia or join Dad's company like Ethan? I've built a life for myself, Mom, a life I'm proud of. But you can't see that, can you? Because I didn't do it your way. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You don't understand what it's like to raise 3 children, Savannah. We've done our best. No, you did your best for Ethan and Olivia, Savannah shot back. I was just back. The one you didn't have to worry about because I wasn't causing trouble or needing constant attention. Patricia opened her mouth to respond but stopped, her face tightening as if Savannah's words had struck a nerve. After a long silence, Patricia finally said, If you're so unhappy with this family, maybe you should think about why that is. Maybe the problem isn't us. Maybe it's you. Savannah felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. Her mother's words hit harder than she expected, but instead of breaking her, they fueled her resolve. She stood, her voice steady but cold. You're right, Mom. The problem is me. Because I keep coming back, hoping things will change. But they won't, will they? You'll always see me as less than Ethan and Olivia. So, you know what? Maybe this is the last Thanksgiving I'll spend with you. Patricia's eyes widened, but before she could respond, Savannah brushed past her and left the room. Back in the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. The laughter and chatter had dulled to awkward murmurs. Savannah's outburst had left a mark, and the tension in the air was palpable. She grabbed her coat and bag, ready to leave, but as she headed toward the door, Ethan blocked her path. Leaving already? He said, smirking. Can't handle the heat? Savannah stared at him, her expression unreadable. Get out of my way, Ethan. Come on, he taunted, don't be like this. You're just mad because you know I'm right. You've always been the weak one, Savannah. The one who can't. Before he could finish, Savannah stepped closer, her voice low but cutting. You think you're better than me, Ethan? With your perfect life that Mom and Dad paid for? Let me tell you something. I've achieved everything I have on my own. No handouts, no shortcuts. Can you say the same? Ethan's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered, his tone dismissive. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Savannah didn't bother responding. She pushed past him and opened the front door, the cold night air hitting her face like a wake-up call. As she walked to her car, she felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in her life, she had stood up to her family. She had spoken her truth, and even though it hurt, it felt good to finally let it out. But this wasn't the end. Savannah wasn't done. She had spent years letting her family walk all over her, but now she was ready to take control. As she drove away from the house, a plan began to form in her mind. She wasn't going to let them dismiss her anymore. She was going to show them exactly who she was, and she was going to do it on her terms. Her family had no idea what was coming. The drive back to Savannah's apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the engine and the occasional buzz of her phone. She didn't look at it. She knew the texts were probably from her mother or Olivia, either trying to guilt her or smooth things over with hollow words. None of it mattered anymore. Her mind was racing with everything she had endured over the years. Every slight, every snide comment, every moment where she was made to feel small, replayed in her head like a cruel highlight reel. Tonight had been the last straw. As she pulled into her parking spot and stepped out of the car, Savannah felt an odd sense of calm. The anger that had been boiling inside her for hours had settled into something sharper: determination. She wasn't going to let her family's behavior slide this time. She was done being the quiet, accommodating daughter. Inside her apartment, Savannah poured herself a glass of wine and sat down at her desk. The warm glow of her computer screen illuminated the room as she opened her emails. She had work to do, but not the kind her family thought was practice. Savannah opened a folder labeled Family. It was something she had started years ago, almost as a joke, but now it felt like a lifeline. Inside were documents, screenshots, and notes, everything she had ever done to help her family. Marketing campaigns she had created for Ethan's business, promotional materials she had designed for Olivia's gallery, and even tax spreadsheets she had organized for her parents. She clicked through the files, her anger reigniting with each one. They had taken advantage of her generosity time and time again, never once offering payment or even a sincere thank you. She opened a blank document and began typing. It wasn't revenge, she told herself. It was justice. The next morning, Savannah woke early. She felt a surge of energy, her plan taking shape in her mind. She wasn't going to destroy her family. That wasn't who she was. But she was going to make them realize what they had lost by treating her like she didn't matter. Her first step was simple: boundaries. Savannah drafted an email to her family. It was short and direct, a departure from the lengthy, apologetic messages she used to send. Dear family, after last night's events, I've decided to take a step back from our family dynamic. For years, I've allowed myself to be treated as less than, and I can no longer accept that. From now on, if you need help with marketing, design, or anything else, I'll be happy to offer my professional rates. I'm also taking time to focus on myself and my own happiness. This means I won't be attending future family gatherings unless I feel truly valued and respected. I hope this message helps you understand where I'm coming from. Best, Savannah. She reread the email several times before hitting send. As soon as it was gone, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Next, she turned her attention to her own life. For so long, she had prioritized her family's needs over her own, and it was time to change that. She pulled out her planner and started making a list of goals, things she had always wanted to do, but had put off because of work or family obligations. By the time she finished, the sun had fully risen, and Savannah felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. It didn't take long for the responses to come in. The first was from Olivia, a string of texts filled with passive-aggressive comments and guilt trips. Wow, really? You're going to charge your own family for help? Guess we know where your priorities are. Savannah rolled her eyes and deleted the messages without responding. Next came Ethan. His email was short and sarcastic. Thanks for the heads up. Don't worry, We'll survive without your help." Savannah smirked. She had expected nothing less. Finally, there was her mother. Patricia's email was longer, filled with the kind of flowery language that tried to mask her true feelings. "Savannah, I read your email, and I must say I'm very disappointed. Family is supposed to stick together, and I don't understand why you feel the need to create distance. If you're upset about last night, I wish you would have spoken to us privately instead of causing a scene. We've always loved you, even if we don't always show it in the way you'd like. I hope you'll reconsider this decision. Family is everything, Savannah, and I would hate to see you isolate yourself over a misunderstanding." "Love," Mom Savannah sighed. It was classic Patricia, skirting responsibility and framing herself as the victim. For a moment, Savannah considered replying, but then she stopped herself. She didn't owe her mother an explanation, not this time. Instead, she closed her laptop and stood, stretching her arms over her head. She had spent enough of her life worrying about what her family thought of her. Now, it was time to focus on herself. She spent the rest of the day doing things that made her happy. She went for a long walk in the park, stopped at her favorite cafe for lunch, and even treated herself to a massage. For the first time in years, Savannah felt free. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. Her family wouldn't change overnight, and she had no intention of backing down. They would learn to respect her, one way or another. Days turned into weeks, and Savannah stuck to her new boundaries. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was walking on eggshells around her family. She poured her energy into her career, her friends, and most importantly, herself. Her absence at family gatherings didn't go unnoticed. She heard through mutual acquaintances that her mother had tried to organize a Sunday lunch, but it wasn't the same without Savannah's calm presence. Olivia and Ethan bickered over petty things, and the atmosphere was tense. Savannah smiled when she heard this. Maybe they were starting to realize how much she had contributed to the family dynamic. Then one day, Savannah received an unexpected phone call. It was Patricia. "Savannah," her mother began, her tone unusually soft. "Can we talk?" Savannah hesitated. This wasn't like her mother. Patricia was never one to admit fault or ask for a conversation. "I'm listening," Savannah replied cautiously. "I've been thinking about what you said. About how we've treated you," Patricia continued. "I didn't want to believe it at first, but I see now that you were right." Savannah's heart skipped a beat. Was this real? "I talked to your father," Patricia went on, "and even to Olivia and Ethan. They're not happy about it, but we all agreed. We've taken you for granted, Savannah. I don't expect you to forgive us overnight, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry, truly." For a moment, Savannah didn't know what to say. The words she had longed to hear for years were finally being spoken, but she didn't feel the rush of joy she had expected. Instead, she felt relief. "Thank you for saying that, Mom," Savannah said after a long pause. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it." "I'd like to make it up to you," Patricia added. "We're hosting a family dinner next week, just the immediate family, nothing fancy. I'd love for you to come. No kids' table, I promise." Savannah chuckled softly. "I'll think about it." When the day of the dinner arrived, Savannah found herself standing outside her parents' house, unsure if she should knock. She had spent so many years walking into this house feeling small and unseen, but not anymore. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The dining room was already set, and to Savannah's surprise, there was a seat reserved for her right next to her father at the head of the table. The kids' table was nowhere in sight. "Savannah," Olivia greeted her, her voice unusually chipper. "Glad you could make it." Savannah nodded politely, taking her seat. Ethan looked less enthusiastic, but managed a begrudging, "Hey." As the dinner began, Savannah noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Her family was trying. Patricia made an effort to include her in the conversation, asking about her latest marketing campaign. Even Olivia complimented her outfit, albeit awkwardly. For the first time in years, Savannah felt like an equal at the table. Toward the end of the meal, Patricia stood and raised her glass. "I'd like to make a toast," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "To Savannah. For too long, we've failed to show her the respect and appreciation she deserves. She's accomplished so much, and we're all so proud of her. Savannah, I hope you know how much we love you." Savannah felt tears prick her eyes. She raised her glass, her voice steady as she replied, "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot to me." As she drove home that night, Savannah couldn't stop smiling. It hadn't been perfect, and she knew there was still work to be done, but it was a start. For the first time in her life, Savannah felt seen, valued, and respected by her family, and for that, she was truly grateful. Her journey wasn't just about setting boundaries or teaching her family a lesson. It was about reclaiming her worth and finding her voice. And in the end, Savannah realized that was the greatest victory of all.